America's northeastern states are a vast region of rolling woodland and mountain ranges, which are allegedly home to countless cryptids, seemingly able to traverse the unsettled areas of these states largely undetected. In April of 1977, the inhabitants of one small town in rural Massachusetts would catch an unwanted glimpse of one such creature. Join us as we investigate the legend of the Dover Demon. As her boyfriend Will had continued to steer the car through the winding country lanes, Abby Brabham sat beside him in the passenger seat, silently willing him to say something. The couple were on their way home from a party, during which an altercation had occurred between them. She had made an off-the-cuff remark about their relationship, which had caused him to lose his temper with her. It had only been 5 minutes since they had left, but those 5 minutes had seemed like an eternity, as he had still not said anything to her. She was beginning to worry that this might be more serious than she had initially believed. Sighing, she peered out of the passenger window at the surrounding countryside, as the passing tree lines and fields were briefly illuminated by the headlights of the car. By now, they were only a short distance from her home, leaving precious few minutes for Abby to try and resolve the situation before being dropped off. The 15-year-old was still frantically trying to think of a way to break the tension when she suddenly caught sight of something up ahead, squatting at the side of the road. As the car continued to move forwards, its probing headlights picked out a strange humanoid shape, settled on its hindquarters, staring at the approaching vehicle. Brabham gasped out loud as its features were gradually revealed by the piercing light from the high beams. Its oversized head sat atop an emaciated and painfully thin body, which was tan in colour and possessed 4 long, spindly limbs. It was the creature's face which had shocked the girl most. It was entirely devoid of any kind of mouth or nose, but the eyes were a pair of almond-shaped pits which seemed to regard her in a hungry and malevolent manner. As the vehicle passed by, they shined bright green in the headlights. It was at this moment, only meters away from the horror crouched at the side of the road, that Abby screamed. Her sudden outburst caused Will to slam his feet hard on the brakes. As his girlfriend sobbed and pointed out the rear window, he looked in the wing mirror to see the red hue of the brake lights reflecting off a short but spindly figure, which had now risen from the side of the road. For a moment, it seemed to study him, and then suddenly made off across the carriageway and into the undergrowth on the opposite side. In the days that followed, it would soon become clear that the young couple were not the only residents of the town to have had such an encounter, or to have been disturbed by this mysterious intruder's otherworldly appearance. Situated on the banks of the Charles River, roughly 15 miles to the southwest of Boston, the small town of Dover had historically led a quiet and unassuming existence. As one might expect, having produced few notable personalities and holding a large catalogue of local historical documents at its repository, the town had made little impact on the national scene. That was until the Easter of 1977, when a string of local teens reported haunting encounters with a strange and unnatural figure, which appeared to be stalking the fields and farmlands bordering the town. These incidents would turn out to be so traumatizing that great efforts were made to document them at the time they occurred, meaning a vivid and lasting profile of the entity was compiled. One which has endured decades of re-examination and investigation, cementing both the creature and the site of its appearance firmly in the history books. The first documented encounter with this unusual entity took place on the evening of April the 21st, as 3 teenagers were driving home across town. The Volkswagen in which they were travelling was driven by its owner, Bill Bartlett, who was giving his 2 friends Mike Mazzocca and Andy Brody a lift to their respective homes. The trio had been travelling northwards along Farm Street when Bartlett caught sight of something straddling a low-lying stone wall, which was situated not far from the left-hand side of the road. At first, the youth believed that what he was seeing was most likely a roaming pet, such as a cat or dog, but as the car drew closer, he quickly realised that it was in fact nothing of the sort. As the light shining upon it began to intensify, Bartlett was able to make out a series of horrifying and nightmarish features. The creature was too big to be a domestic cat, standing about 3.5 feet tall and being distinctly humanoid in appearance. Its emaciated torso seemed far too inadequate to support the bulbous head which sat atop its shoulders, and which was devoid of any features, save for a pair of large orange eyes. There was no fur covering its naked body, the skin of which appeared to be rough like sandpaper and was coloured somewhat like a peach. The bizarre-looking creature was slowly and methodically crabbing its way across the top of the wall, its tendril-like fingers curling around the stones in order to gain a sufficient grip. As the car drove by, the entity quickly melted away into the darkness. Bartlett excitedly asked his passengers if they too had seen it, only to be met with confused expressions. Immediately upon his return home from having dropped off his friends, the youth quickly told his father what had taken place, and then drew a detailed picture of what he had seen. Little did he know it at the time, that this would not be the only sketch of the creature composed that evening. Several hours later, on the other side of the town and at the southern end of Miller Hill Road, 15-year-old John Baxter had also been making his way home. He had just spent several hours at his girlfriend's house and was conscious that he would most likely be in trouble upon his return due to the lateness of the hour. As he hurried through the empty streets towards his destination, the youth caught sight of another pedestrian walking towards him from the opposite direction. Initially believing his fellow traveller to be a younger child due to its short stature, Baxter had slowed his pace to investigate, only for the figure opposite to immediately follow suit. With the skies above being overcast and the person ahead of him being stood just outside the illuminating hue of a nearby streetlight, Baxter could make out very little detail. Whoever it was remained completely still and seemed to regard him. Then, in an instant, the figure had turned and scurried off to the left, disappearing into a wooded gully which happened to run alongside the road. Breaking into a sprint, Baxter gave chase, hearing the sounds of rustling leaves and snapping twigs up ahead as he began to gain ground. Seconds later, the boy found himself standing at the bottom of the gully, quite alone. Or so he thought. Quietly surveying his surroundings, he noticed an unnatural shape, standing on top of a large rock off to the side of a tree, about 30 meters away. In that moment, a shaft of moonlight peered out from beyond the cloud cover, providing just enough luminosity to make out the details of what lurked before him. In the dim light, John Baxter saw something unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was a bizarre-looking creature with a pale, simian-like body, possessing a painfully thin neck, which seemed to be struggling to support its grossly oversized head. The face staring back at him across the short distance was completely blank and devoid of any features, save for 2 dark patches where the eyes should have been. Now terrified that this creature may have lured him away from the town in order to attack him, Baxter turned and ran as fast as he could, finally emerging onto the main road. A few minutes later, a passing car had slowed down to investigate. It was driven by a young couple, who were sufficiently concerned by the boy's emotional state to offer him a lift home. The image of the alleged creature which Baxter went on to draw would prove to be eerily similar to the one produced by Bill Bartlett. The same can be said of a third image, which would go on to be drawn as a result of Abby Brabham's encounter the following evening. The various sketches and interpretations of the creature, which would in time become known as the Dover Demon, are perhaps the most significant reason this strange series of sightings remains such an enduring mystery. Some commentators have highlighted what they believe to be similarities between the being's featureless face and wide-eyed stare, and witnessed testimony of traditional grey extraterrestrials. But the absence of an accompanying spacecraft or similar technology during the Dover encounters would seem to contradict this theory. The fact that the entity made no effort to approach or communicate with any of the witnesses, instead choosing to evade them on every occasion, has led many to suggest that it may have been some form of cryptid. Massachusetts possesses many areas of rugged and inaccessible terrain, largely untouched by human beings. It is perhaps little surprise, then, that the state has played host to a high percentage of cryptid encounters. These include reported sightings of Sasquatches, the giant-winged thunderbird, and the enigmatic pukwudgies, dwarf-like hominids which were first referenced in the stories of Native Americans. Anthropologists who have studied the case have pointed out that all 3 of the Dover Demon encounters took place in close proximity to local water sources. This suggests that whatever the creature may have been, it is possible that it was attempting to remain close to its natural habitat. In the aftermath of the incidents, a local resident named Mark Senott would later come forward, providing details of an even older encounter with the creature. He would describe an incident in which he had been driving through the town one evening during the summer of 1972, when he had been startled by something which had run across the road in front of him. This unknown creature was notably short in stature and was running upright on 2 legs, possessing a pair of brightly illuminated eyes. After Senott had brought his car to a stop, he had watched the running figure reach the nearby woods, where it had then disappeared from sight at the edge of a large pond, which was situated there. It has been highlighted that all the sightings took place during the hours of darkness, and when plotted on a map, they appear to track in a straight line which passes directly through or across the local area. This raises the argument that whatever the witnesses observed may have been migrating or travelling in a set direction, as if the town itself may not have been of any interest or consequence to the entity. As is common with sightings of unknown creatures or alleged monsters, rational explanations for what has been seen are numerous. There have been suggestions that the creature observed by the teenagers may have been an orphan moose cub, in possession of a very pale pelt of fur. These animals have very long and spindly legs, and it has been proposed that in poor light conditions, their gait could be mistaken for a taller creature walking or running with its upper torso bent forwards. However, Dover does not lie anywhere near any regional moose habitats. To counter this somewhat inconvenient fact, similar hypotheses have been put forward. Some suggest that the Dover demon could have been an albino calf, or some other animal which had escaped from a local collection, such as an exotic ape or monkey, or even a disfigured forest animal. And yet a simple glance at the creature depicted in the drawings by the teenagers at the time of the encounters suggests that what they saw could not have been any known species. There are simply too many commonalities in these sketches of something which did not resemble or even move like anything they had ever seen before. Is it possible that the children were the victims of some elaborate hoax, or that they were instead the perpetrators of one? In the half-century since the incident, there have been no further sightings of the creature in the town, or indeed anything which resembles what they saw. That said, creatures of a similar description have been seen elsewhere across the globe. In 1996, for instance, Brazilian authorities were reported to have captured a being in Virginia which closely resembled the one seen in Massachusetts in 1977. As it stands, without any evidence to back up the testimonies of those involved, and without a convincing enough argument to logically explain what they saw, the events of that fateful weekend in Dover remain one of America's most intriguing mysteries. We have already explored a variety of unusual cryptid sightings which are alleged to have taken place within the USA, and as time passes, such incidents continue to occur, often accompanied by dashcam or mobile phone footage of the creatures involved. It is possible that at some future time, the evidence needed to verify the existence of the Dover demon may yet surface, and in doing so, answer the questions which remain about what took place in this sleepy and unassuming northeastern community.